What if I told you that the constant worrying you do about your future isn't actually preparing you for what's to come, but instead it's making everything harder than it needs to be? And what if the key to unlocking peace and success was simply letting go of that grip you have on trying to control everything? How often do you find yourself caught in the whirlwind of what ifs? You know, those moments when your mind starts racing, playing out every possible scenario that might go wrong in the future. We've all been there. You lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, mentally solving problems that haven't even happened yet. You tell yourself that you're being cautious, that you're preparing for the worst. But what if I told you that worrying about things that may never come is actually paralyzing you, not protecting you? At its core, worry is a lie we tell ourselves. We believe that by thinking about every possible outcome, we are somehow being responsible. But in reality, worry is just fear rehearsing for a future that hasn't arrived, and most of the time, never will. It consumes our mental energy and leaves us exhausted, with no real solutions to the problems we've created in our heads. What's worse, we've been conditioned to believe that this mental treadmill, running laps around imaginary problems, is just part of life. But what if, instead of feeding that cycle, we took a step back? What if for once we stopped worrying? What if in those moments when our mind races, we simply chose to be present? Not because everything was perfect, but because we trusted that we could handle whatever comes, even if things don't go according to plan. That's when the real shift happens. You see, when you stop worrying, you don't become careless. You become more focused, more grounded in the moment. When your mind isn't scattered with what ifs, you become present, and that presence opens doors to clarity, peace, and creativity. You stop fighting the future you've imagined and start living the life that's unfolding in front of you. Here's the thing most people don't realize. Worry isn't your brain being productive. It's your brain trying to feel useful when it's afraid. Worry is like a faulty survival instinct, constantly scanning for threats, trying to predict every possible outcome as if thinking about it harder will somehow change the future. But here's the truth. Worry is an illusion of control. It gives you the false sense that you're doing something productive. But in reality, you're spinning your wheels, mentally stuck on problems that don't even exist. The worst part? While you're caught up in your worry loop, life is moving on without you. Opportunities slip by. Moments of joy and connection fade into the background. Why? Because worry makes you blind to them. It keeps you so focused on the potential for disaster that you miss the good things already happening around you. Imagine if, instead of playing out every scenario of disaster in your head, you asked yourself, what if I'm okay, even if things don't go as planned? Just that one simple question shifts your entire perspective. It brings you back into the present moment, where real strength comes from. You don't need to know everything. You just need to trust yourself to respond. Not react, but respond to whatever life brings. That's where true confidence comes from. It's not built by avoiding discomfort. It's built by moving through it, breathing through it, and knowing that no matter what happens, you won't collapse under pressure. You will show up. Maybe not perfectly, but you'll show up with presence and clarity. The beauty of this shift is that life becomes easier, not because it suddenly becomes perfect, but because you stop making it harder than it needs to be. When you stop worrying, everything begins to flow differently. Conversations become lighter, decisions feel clearer, and even when you make mistakes, you no longer see them as signs that everything is falling apart. You're no longer interpreting every misstep as failure. You start acting from a place of peace, not fear. And here's the real kicker. People notice. When you stop broadcasting anxiety in your tone, your body language, and your posture, you begin to embody calm. You move slower, but with more precision. You say less, but each word carries more weight. You stop trying to control every detail, and you start trusting life instead of fighting it. Your energy changes, and the world around you starts responding to that shift. Now here's the hard pill to swallow. A lot of the problems you think you have aren't actually problems. They're stories created by your worry. It's not always your situation that's overwhelming. It's your interpretation of it. It's the meaning you've assigned to situations that haven't even happened yet. A single unread message becomes proof that someone is upset with you. A quiet room becomes a sign that you're not doing enough. One unexpected event, and suddenly your whole day feels like it's spiraling out of control. But what if you didn't add meaning? What if you didn't jump to conclusions or make things personal? What if you simply let things be without coloring them with fear? That's when life starts to simplify itself. Not because you've gained more control, but because you've stopped giving your peace away to imaginary futures. One of the most powerful things you can do is stop narrating your life with worry. You don't need to constantly analyze how things will unfold. You don't need to forecast every potential disaster. You don't need to overplan for every possible outcome. In fact, some of the most powerful people you'll meet are the ones who seem oddly calm in the face of chaos. It's not because they've mastered life. It's because they've stopped letting their minds tell a scary story about every unknown. And that's the key. You don't need to know every answer right now. You don't need to have everything figured out before you move forward. Life isn't a perfectly scripted movie. It unfolds in layers, in moments, in pauses. Sometimes the wisest thing you can do is wait without worry. That's hard to do when your mind has been trained to fill every silence with panic. But once you notice that urge to fix everything right now, you also gain the power to pause and question it. Why am I rushing? What am I afraid will happen if I stay here for just a second longer? Who told me that peace only comes after everything is solved? The truth is, peace doesn't come from controlling life. It comes from letting go of the illusion that you can control everything. Real peace is about unhooking your emotional state from your circumstances. It's about choosing to stay present even when things are unfinished, unpolished, and unresolved. It's about not letting life steal your center. When you stop feeding the worry, you regain your energy. You become more creative, more open to opportunities, more grounded in your decisions. You handle challenges as they come, not as you feared they would be. You take better care of your body because you're not drained by mental chaos. You show up differently in your relationships because you're no longer stuck in loops of doubt and what ifs. Worry feeds on imaginary futures, but peace lives in the present. And once you begin to taste that peace, even in small doses, you'll realize that the world around you doesn't have to change. You changed. And that's when everything starts to align. Not because you forced it, but because you stopped fighting it. So what would happen if you chose to let go of the worry? If you chose peace instead of panic, presence instead of overthinking, and trust instead of control? Maybe, just maybe, everything will start to go well. You ever notice how worry doesn't knock on the door? It just lets itself in? 1 minute you're fine, and the next, your brain's dragging you down a rabbit hole of everything that might go wrong. You're thinking about next week's meeting, that text you haven't responded to, what your boss might say, what your friend might mean by that offhand comment, and somehow you're in full crisis mode over things that haven't even happened and probably won't. That's not mindfulness, that's mental chaos. And the wild part, we call it being responsible, as if losing sleep over imaginary disasters makes us noble or prepared, as if spinning in our heads somehow earns us a badge of emotional maturity. Let's get real. That overthinking, that's your brain stuck in survival mode. It's trying to do something, trying to protect you. But it's using an outdated playbook, one that says, if I rehearse every worst case scenario, I'll be ready when it happens. But here's the kicker. Most of the time, it never happens. What does happen is this. You lose hours, days, years of your life being stuck in your head. You overanalyze, you misread people, you assume the worst, and all that thinking doesn't make you wiser. It makes you tired, because worrying doesn't give you clarity. It clouds it. Think about how your body feels when you're anxious. Your chest tightens, your shoulders creep up, your jaw clenches, your breath gets shallow. That's not just stress. That's your nervous system reacting to a threat it can't see, because it isn't real. And still, you believe it. You believe the story your brain is spinning. You start calling yourself an anxious person or a chronic overthinker, like it's just part of your identity. But that's not who you are. That's just who you've been practicing being. That's not a personality trait. That's a habit. And like any habit, it can be unlearned. Here's the truth no one tells you. Worry is addictive. Not because it feels good, but because it feels familiar. It gives your mind a job. It says, hey, I don't know what's going to happen, but at least I'm doing something. That's what makes it so seductive. It feels like control, but it's not. It's just motion, not progress. And while you're busy mentally preparing for things that may never happen, life is quietly happening all around you. A laugh you don't fully hear, a friend's face you don't really see, a moment of peace that slips through your fingers because your mind is too busy checking for danger. It's like trying to enjoy the beach while scanning the sky for lightning that isn't there. And what's worse is that we've normalized this. We've equated anxiety with ambition. We've started calling overthinking a skill set. We wear our exhaustion like a badge of honor. But a noisy mind isn't a strong mind, it's a tired one. It's a mind running in circles because no one ever showed it how to slow down. But you can. You don't have to live like this, in constant mental rehearsal. You don't have to run every conversation through your head 10 different ways. You don't have to play emotional chess with every person you meet. You don't have to over-prepare, over-explain, or over-apologize just to feel safe. There is another way, and it starts with this simple shift. Noticing when your mind is spiraling and choosing not to follow it. That one moment, that breath, that pause, it's everything. Because when you can name it, you can change it. When you realize, oh, I'm worrying, I'm forecasting a future that hasn't happened, you open a door to come back, to now, to this moment. And in that moment, you regain your power. Because that's what worry steals the most. Your presence, your ability to actually be here for your own life. But the second you stop feeding that cycle, the second you stop treating every thought like it's the truth, everything changes. You stop bracing for impact and start building trust. Not blind optimism, not fake positivity. Real trust, the kind that says, I may not know what's coming, but I trust myself to handle it when it gets here. And that's the difference. When you stop needing to predict every twist and turn, you begin to flow. Not because life got easier, but because your energy isn't stuck in resistance. That's when things shift. You're no longer triggered by silence. You don't jump at every what if. You stop interpreting discomfort as danger. You stop scanning every situation for what could go wrong and start noticing what's going right. You move differently, slower but more certain, quieter but more powerful. You don't over-explain. You don't over-apologize. And when your nervous system finally catches up, when it realizes you're not in danger anymore, it starts to breathe with you. And then the real magic happens. You begin to trust your instincts again. That quiet voice underneath the noise, the one that doesn't scream, the one that simply knows, the voice that's been waiting for you to stop performing panic long enough to finally be heard. That's the shift. From overthinking to knowing, from spiraling to grounding, from fear to presence. It's not always easy, especially if you've been wired for worry most of your life, but it's worth it. Because once you stop letting your mind drag you through imagined futures, you finally get to show up in the only place where anything ever actually happens, here. And in this place, you don't need to rehearse your strength. You just live it. So what actually happens when you stop worrying? Not just faking calm on the outside, not pretending everything's fine while secretly bracing for impact. I mean, really stopping. Letting go of that mental loop that's constantly scanning the horizon for the next disaster. Choosing to be here, right now, instead of living in a dozen what-if scenarios. Here's what happens. Your entire inner world begins to shift. Slowly, quietly, but unmistakably. First, your body starts to let go of the armor it didn't even know it was wearing. You breathe deeper, not because someone told you to, but because your nervous system finally feels like it can. Your jaw isn't clenched. Your shoulders aren't up around your ears. There's no more subtle bracing for impact. It's like the tension that lived inside your muscles, your gut, your chest, starts to loosen its grip. And when it does, you feel something wild, relief. Not because everything's solved, but because you finally stopped fighting a battle that only existed in your head. Your mind quiets too. Not all at once. Thoughts still come, because that's what minds do. But now they pass through. You're not hanging on to each one like it's gospel. You're not chasing every anxious narrative your brain throws at you. You notice the thought, You see it, but it doesn't own you anymore. You realize maybe for the first time, just because I thought it doesn't mean it's true. That's when things get powerful. That's when freedom begins. When you're not spending all your energy anticipating what might go wrong, you finally have the bandwidth to show up for what's actually right in front of you. Conversations feel lighter. You're more curious, more present, more you. You're not stuck in your head trying to decode every word someone said or replaying every interaction to see what you missed. You're just here, listening, responding, experiencing life with both feet on the ground. And here's what surprises a lot of people. When you stop worrying, you don't become careless. You become clear. You don't lose your edge. You just stop using it to cut yourself. Decisions come easier. Not because you know exactly what's going to happen, but because you trust yourself enough to make a move. You're not waiting for everything to feel perfect. You're not paralyzed by overanalysis. You've stopped looking for guarantees and you've started looking inward for guidance. That's the biggest shift of all. You stop outsourcing your peace to circumstances. It doesn't depend on whether everything goes smoothly. You don't need perfect conditions to feel okay. Peace becomes something you carry, not something you wait for. And when you carry peace, the world responds differently. You stop attracting chaos, not because the world got quieter, but because you're no longer tuned into it. You walk into a room differently. Your energy doesn't say, please like me. It says, I'm grounded. I'm okay, even if you're not. That subtle shift, people feel it. They respect it. They lean toward it. But the shift isn't just external. Internally, something far more sacred happens. You begin to recognize the difference between who you really are and who you were when you were worried all the time. You start to see that anxious version of you for what it was. A survival strategy, a coping mechanism, a habit you picked up because the world once taught you that being on edge made you safe. But now, you know better. You start making choices from peace instead of panic. You stop overcommitting just to feel secure. You stop saying yes when you really mean no. You stop bending over backward for approval that doesn't even feel good when you get it. Because for the first time, you're checking in with yourself first, not with the anxiety, not with the future, but with you. And here's where it gets personal. You begin to reclaim pieces of yourself you didn't even know were missing. The part of you that used to enjoy slow mornings, the part that laughed without overthinking what it sounded like, the part that felt creative, spontaneous, open. That version of you didn't go away. She was just buried under all that mental noise. When the noise dies down, the real you returns. And it's not all sunshine and clarity, by the way. Sometimes what rises to the surface when you stop worrying is grief, regret, the realization of just how long you've been living in your head instead of in your life. But even that is healing. Even that is sacred because it means you're coming back to your body, to your breath, to your actual lived experience. And in that return, everything starts to shift. Not just how you feel, but how you respond to life. You stop needing to fix everything right now. You stop chasing closure like it's oxygen. You stop needing to label every feeling or predict every outcome. You make peace with not knowing, and you discover that's where the real power is. Because presence, true presence, doesn't need all the answers. It just needs permission. And when you give yourself that permission, life begins to unfold in ways that don't just feel easier, they feel real, more vivid, more grounded, less filtered through the lens of fear. This isn't about spiritual bypassing. This isn't about ignoring your emotions. This is about no longer letting worry write the script of your life. It's about trusting that clarity can come without panic, that peace can exist even when things are unfinished, that you don't need to mentally suffer in order to prepare. In fact, the less you suffer through imaginary futures, the more energy you have to respond to your real life, the one that's actually here, waiting for you. And when you show up to that life fully, even if it's messy, even if it's uncertain, something beautiful happens. You stop trying to survive every moment and you start actually living it. What if peace didn't come at the end of the to-do list? What if it wasn't something you earn after you've solved everything, fixed everyone, and predicted every outcome? What if peace, real peace, is already available to you right now underneath all the noise? That's what you start to realize when you stop worrying. At first, the stillness feels strange, unfamiliar, like something's missing. Because if you're used to living in your head, if you've trained your nervous system to brace for the worst, calm can feel almost threatening. But that discomfort isn't danger. It's just your system learning a new way of being, one where presence is enough. And presence, it turns out, is where everything starts to change. When you stop living in the future, in the imagined problems, the what ifs, the endless mental rehearsals, you begin to notice what's been here all along. You hear the way your breath slows when you're not rushing. You feel the warmth in a cup of coffee you actually taste. You notice the color of the sky instead of the weight of your thoughts. You begin experiencing life, not just surviving it. And this shift doesn't require a spiritual awakening or a 10-day silent retreat. It requires one small decision: to stop believing that worry is who you are. Because that's the lie most of us are sold. That we are our anxious thoughts, that we're the overthinker, the fixer, the person who carries everyone else's stress, holds everything together, never lets their guard down. But you weren't born with that weight. You picked it up somewhere along the way. Maybe to stay safe, maybe to stay loved. But it's not you. You are not your panic. You are not your tension. You are not your survival mode. You're the awareness beneath it. And when you begin to separate your identity from your fear, something extraordinary happens. You create space to meet yourself again. Not the version of you that's always scanning for threats. The real you. The grounded, intuitive, unfiltered you. The one who doesn't need to prove anything to be worthy of peace. But here's the thing. Awareness alone isn't enough. We don't rewire a lifetime of worry with a single insight. That's where practice comes in. Gentle, consistent, human practice. It starts with noticing. When your thoughts start racing, when your chest tightens, when you're about to spiral, that's the moment. Not to judge, not to fix, just to pause, to come home, to say this is worry, it's here, but I don't have to follow it. That pause, that's a rep. Every time you catch yourself before slipping into fear, that's a rep. Every time you choose to breathe before reacting, that's a rep. Every time you let go of the need to solve something that isn't even real yet, that's you building a new foundation. Slowly, steadily, patiently, and the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. You start to live with more intention. You stop outsourcing your peace to things going right. You stop treating stillness like a reward and start treating it like your baseline. This is how a nervous system learns to relax, not through force, through familiarity. The more you return to the present, the more your body believes it's safe to be here. And the more safety you build inside, the less you need to control what's outside. That's when the deeper transformation begins. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop apologizing for your needs. You stop carrying other people's emotions like they're your responsibility. And something inside of you, maybe for the first time in years, breathes freely. You start trusting your gut again. You listen when your body says no. You slow down when you need rest. You stop needing everyone else to validate your choices because you finally learned how to validate yourself. That's what building inner peace really looks like. It's not perfection. It's not getting to a place where nothing ever bothers you. It's responding to life from your core instead of your fear. It's remembering that you don't have to be a different version of yourself to deserve calm. You just have to stop running from the version you already are. And over time, that calm becomes your compass. That grounded energy becomes the way you lead. You no longer need to raise your voice to feel heard. You don't need to argue to prove your worth. You don't live in defense. You live in alignment. It doesn't mean things won't go wrong. It means you trust yourself to meet life even when they do. That's the real power. Not the illusion of control, but the strength of presence. Not being the most prepared person in the room, but being the most grounded one. Not avoiding discomfort, but knowing that you can feel it and still be okay. And that's when people start to feel it too. You walk differently. You speak with more weight. You're not performing calm. You are calm. Not because you've numbed out, but because you've stopped letting worry steal your joy. And maybe the most beautiful part, you begin to feel like yourself again. Maybe even for the first time. Not the self who's always hustling for peace. Not the one constantly planning for disaster, the one who's here in this moment, fully alive. And you realize nothing outside of you needed to change. It was never about the job, the relationship, the schedule. It was about how much space worry was taking up in your body. And now that you've reclaimed that space, you have room to breathe, room to feel, room to live. That's what happens when you stop worrying. You don't just feel better, you become better. Not better than anyone else. Better than the version of you that was always chasing safety, always fighting the now. And here you are, grounded, present, human. And for once, that's enough.